Again. Hello, everyone, and welcome to once again another episode of the European Volleyball Show. I am joining you here live from Katowice, as you guys can see, ahead of the EuroVolley male semifinals. We have two excellent matches today, and there's no one else in the world who is better prepared to join me today other than Rob St. Rob, how are you doing today?
Great, Dan. Thanks. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so cool to have you there, like on site in Katowice with the court behind you with the matches in just a couple hours. It's you've had boots on the ground pretty much this entire tournament, which has been really cool for the show and just to hear from you about how everything's been going on. So I'm excited to do this at a special day, special time right before the semifinals. We've got a lot to go over.
Yeah, it's been great being here in person, watching all the matches previously in Ostrava, which you guys will know if you checked out our last show. Tons of content coming, guys. If you aren't on EuroVolley TV tonight watching the semifinals, you guys have to be watching the games or wherever your TV provider is showing them. Also, we have a ton of videos. I sat down with a lot of players yesterday, interviewing Mikoletto, interviewing Atanasejevic, Lisinac, Rock Mazic, all these guys, and that's on the YouTube European Volleyball channel. So guys, tons of behind the scenes stuff coming, including previews for the semifinals. But Rob, that's not the point of this show. The point of the show is to break down these matches happening tonight. Where do you want to start with Poland, Slovenia? How about that?
Yeah, let's start with Poland, Slovenia, and let's kind of start with how the teams got to this point, because the last show we had was last Friday, like 8 days ago, right before the eighth. While didn't really have a whole lot of interest in the four matches, all 4 3-0s, all the favorites won those. There were some that happened in the eighth finals, so I want to start there. But with the teams there, I mean, Poland has been playing full time, all of pool play, all of the elimination rounds so far, Gdansk, and now they're the home team. They might be the best team in the tournament. They've been the favorites in every so far, and to our picks of if they're no problems with finals, and surprisingly dominant performance over Russia in the quarterfinals. That was very impressive. I did not expect that to be a 3-0 win. Poland. The first set, I believe, was 25. Like, they kind of destroyed, and very good team that we've talked about in the last couple of weeks, missing some very crucial players. They're missing both Olympic opposites. No Maxim Milov, no Viktor Poletayev. We've seen Igor Kliuka on the right side, but the second outside hitter spot not been nearly as good for them without Kliuka over there, and that was a huge difference against Poland. If you're going to beat them at home, like playing in Poland, then you've really got to be perfect on that. Russia definitely wasn't. So Poland here in the semifinals looking beatable as ever. Get to their like recent Slovenia in this tournament pretty soon, because there's a lot of very interesting background the last 3 of these tournaments going into up, and a lot of them have been made by both teams that I'm excited to dig into, because it's kind of fueled the fire of the match even a little bit more, and I think that
Sorry, guys. I was muted there to try and prevent some of the arena sound from coming through. But to get back to my points here, Robbie made some great points here. But remember also when Poland was doing very well last year in 2019, our last edition of EuroVolley, before they ultimately lost in the semifinals. And like you said, Russia, Definitely not as close as people expected it to be, but you made a good point missing their two opposites, Maxim Mikhailov, Viktor Poletaev. And the thing is, there's a bit of a drop off there for Russia when they go to that third player, whether it's Podlishnek or whether it's, I guess, Skliuka on the right side, which I don't think either of us expected going into the tournament. I actually thought, and maybe they should have done this, Kirill Klets, who actually was a pretty proven starting opposite in Russia last year. I thought maybe Skliuka was great, he's a good player, but you can maximize the Russian team by maybe starting Klets and then moving Skliuka, kicking Podlishnek to the bench.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dan. That was an interesting move. I think that when we saw in the Olympics with Russia, when they were playing as the Russian Olympic Committee, Podlesnik came in for Dmitry Volkov at certain points and actually played pretty well. And with the move to put Kliuka on the right in the absence of those other two opposites, they were really putting a lot of expectations and weight on the shoulders of Podlesnik, and guys kind of like that. They brought Voronkov and Semishev, or like the other outsides, in addition to Dmitry Volkov again. And none of those guys particularly were able to play consistently enough, because I think John made the point in the chat that Kirill Klets was a little bit banged up, was like had a minor injury he was fighting through, which I think was part of the issue, because really their only option was to put Igor Kliuka at opposite, and that's just not the way that particular team is built to succeed. So we talked about them, Russia, in pool play. They lost to Turkey, finishing in second in the pool, and just didn't look like the Russia that we're used to seeing. And I think they came up against a Polish team playing in Poland that I just don't think they were going to beat with this particular roster configuration. So I think that's kind of about all there is to say about that. I thought Poland was just significantly the better team that day.
Yeah, and Poland has looked like, obviously they're here, one of the best teams in the tournament. Talking to the players here, Rob, you can tell that they're definitely in a different mindset maybe than the Olympics. Like, I think that experience was really tough for them, but I think allowed them to grow stronger, to learn from each other. And definitely they're coming in here with a mission, and it's really apparent seeing kind of the attitude of the team here, where they're like, some teams are happy, they're loose, they're having fun together. Poland is 100%. They are focused, eyes on the prize, and they know that this crowd's going to be really important for them, and they need to play their best volleyball here.
Well said. Yeah, and we'll get to that later, because we've been talking in the last couple shows about how pressure and expectations affect teams in different tournaments, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Dan, about the four teams that we have left, who feels the most pressure or the weight of expectations or stuff like that. But we've talked about before, and I want to recap very quickly, that Poland's mindset into this tournament probably, at least from some sources, changed after what happened in Tokyo 2020 at the Olympics. They clearly were eliminated in that tournament way earlier than they wanted to be. And I think that maybe it came from the top of the Polish Volleyball Federation, wherever it came from. Poland's mindset in this tournament in EuroVolley 2021 shifted from like, okay, we're gonna get some young guys in. We might not necessarily play the Olympic starters every match. It's not as much about the goal or the results of this tournament.
Yeah.
We're building for the future, but instead they switched to, all right, we kind of need to go out and win this tournament. And we've seen that with their lineup choices and just the whole mindset of the team. Dan, the very visible focus and energy and concentration and like the effort that they're winning this tournament. And it's not excuse me, point isn't going to go try and win the match, but there's clear in this particular like Polish team this tournament versus what we maybe thought we were going to see. Now that they've been home, which is a massive advantage for them, and included in the semis and the finals, potentially the medal matches tomorrow. And we'll talk about the expectations a little bit, but they have not faltered or failed, disappointed in any way. They've looked incredible. All the statistics that you want to see from it, like Poland, have looked fantastic. I am very high going into these last couple of days of the tournament.
For sure, and I'm very excited on a personal level to see Polish fans in Poland, because I've seen it a million times on TV. I've heard so many stories. The players here will tell you, by talking to you, that it's just an incredible atmosphere and so unique. So I'm excited to see that. Slovenia, though, definitely a team that's been in the lion's den before already this tournament, beating the Czech Republic in front of a full house in Ostrava. So, they've been there recently and it didn't seem to faze them at all. And but one thing I think it was Tina Arnott was saying to me, or Clement Chibul, he's saying that first set is so important because if you can take that first set in an away game, then that deflates the crowd so much. And if they win that first game, which you kind of saw when Czech Republic beat France, it's just that the energy, the enthusiasm, the crowd was just too much to handle. So that's going to be a big factor, especially considering the fact that, we haven't had crowds for a while. So it's going to, players aren't used to the energy and the loudness and the intensity maybe at this point. It's a very different environment from playing without fans. Rob, question for you about Poland. Who's going to start in the middle for us in the next match?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I think Peter Nowakovsky has had a really good tournament, and I think he's played the most consistently of the three middles that we expect, just from what I've seen. Yeah. This is a hard one to call because all three of them are so good, and they're really honestly interchangeable with the amount of playing time they all can handle. But we've seen a lot of Nowakovsky, and I thought he's been excellent, and I just really like his game personally. So I would expect to see him and probably Jakub Kokonowski, which means leaving Mateusz Biniak on the bench, which is crazy to think about because of he's the biggest of the three. His serve is unbelievable, but just those other two guys have had really good tournaments so far. And I mean, that Heinen won't be shy about going to the bench if he needs to. But if I had to guess right now what we're going to see later tonight, I would pick Nowakovsky, Kokonowski. But we'll see.
Yeah,
it's a really good question.
You have to keep in mind two very strong offensive middles coming at them in Alan Pajenk and Jan Kazimiernik of Slovenia. That's going to be a tough one for them. Not too many lineup questions, I would say, for Slovenia. I think they've started the exact same lineup through the whole tournament and essentially through the last 5 years. So not too much to discuss then. We have seen the young Rok Mozic come in several times. By the way, I mean, I haven't said enough about him. He's going to be a future superstar, guys. We did an interview with him yesterday. And yeah, watch him in warm-ups before the game. He's one of the biggest warm-up hitters I've seen. But one thing I've noticed, Rob, is something maybe I didn't notice when you're watching VNL or watching Slovenia from your TV, is their serving is really, really strong. Not something I maybe appreciated as much about Slovenia before, but if you think about it, Jan Kazimiernik, one of the best jump float servers as a middle, Alan Pajenk, a fantastic jump spin server, and the whole team really have effective serves that can get in your head, either placed really well, a lot of floats. So Poland's absolutely incredible team in every aspect, but I guess if you had to pick something, probably a reception is maybe one of their weaknesses.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a great point about their serving and a great point about their experience already in this tournament playing in front of crowds. And I want to get into both of those things a little bit more. Yeah, you're right about Pajenk. I think he had the ace to beat the Czech Republic in like a really close third set in the quarterfinals. Yeah, their serving is not only like physical and like physically difficult to handle. I also think their mental game from the service line is really, really strong. I think they make the right choices in a couple of the guys that just go after it and hit their hardest jump serve every time versus some of the jump servers that locate a little bit more, or the jump float servers that are good at like hitting that ball deep to like catch the passers kind of in the shoulders before it drops down towards the end line. Like all of that stuff is really, really important to have a lot of service variety on your team. That's something really important in high level volleyball, in my opinion, is that your service as a team is not the same across all 6 of the serving players in the lineup. I think it's really important to have enough variety to keep the receiving unit of the other team at least a little bit like second guessing what kind of serve they're about to see. Because
Rob, is there any team that inspired that opinion?
I wondered if you picked up where I was pulling that from. Yeah, Team USA in the Olympics is what I'm getting that from. All of them were very similar jump serves. I mean, they all missed all their serves in the Olympics anyway, but I thought that their roster construction wasn't good enough in service variety. And I think Slovenia really has that, which is huge. And I'm really happy you made the point about the crowds that they've already played in front of and the importance of the first set, like according to the players. And I think you're absolutely right. They're all relearning how to play in front of crowds because it's been so long and it makes such a massive difference. And it's interesting to hear them talk about how important the first set is. And Slovenia, like Tine Ernau, of all people, is a great one to talk about that because he's been around for so long and has played in these matches before. I think they're prepared. They might be as good as any team in this tournament at playing on the road against a home partisan crowd and being prepared for that. I like their ability to hang in and like deal with the incredible atmosphere of the Polish crowd. I'm excited to see how they handle that. I think they could be exactly the right team to take that advantage away from Poland. And we got to talk about the history here for a second.
Yeah, for sure.
The last three European championships, 2015, 17, and 19, Poland has been eliminated in all three of those tournaments by Slovenia. The last three in a row, Slovenia has beaten Poland in the knockout stage to knock them out of the tournament. And that
crazy.
Let me tell you, the Polish players, the Slovenian players, all the Polish fans know that very, very well. And this match is incredibly important to both teams for all those reasons. But the recent history, obviously, on the side of Slovenia.
Yeah, for sure. Rob, what's the biggest crowd you've played in front of?
The biggest crowd I've played in front of? Oh,
yeah.
Man, like nothing even close to in comparison to what these guys are playing. Like a couple hundred probably.
Yeah,
I mean, this is going to be in the 20,000s, I would expect. Which is absolutely outrageous. And even that, like even the level that I've played at, which is nowhere near this high, it makes a difference when you have people.
That was my point, Just a few guys before we move on, asking in the chat if you can watch the match live, of course. Guys, EuroVolley TV, EuroVolley.tv is where you can watch the match. Or if it's showing on TV in your country, check that first. You can check for TV, EuroVolley.tv. It'll be on one of those platforms starting in 2 hours, pretty much from this point. You guys can watch the whole thing. You can watch tonight's match, Italy versus Serbia, which is also my segue into our second preview, because we do have another match to get here. But before we do that, Rob, give me your snappy prediction. What's our set score in Poland versus Slovenia?
Oh man, I think it's all going to depend on that first set. Like you said, I think that's going to make a huge difference. We've seen that in like the matches in the Czech Republic that you were there for, Dan, that involved the home team anyway, were really dictated, and the tone was set by what happened in the first set. And I want to go back and talk about that a little bit. But about this matchup in particular, Slovenia is the type of a team that just won't go away in close games. Like they have no fear of any big situation, in my opinion. You can put them in Poland in the EuroVolley semifinals against Poland with 20,000 people there, and they won't think any differently about how well prepared they are for that particular situation. I don't think they're afraid of the moment, and they're really good at hanging around in close sets. When it gets to 23-23 or 24-24, Slovenia is really good in those moments. We've seen that throughout this tournament, throughout the last several years. So I think it's going to come down to the first set. I think Slovenia will be able to steal the first set, and I think that will be enough for them to eliminate Poland again in 5 sets, 3-2.
Oh, wouldn't that be something? I'm going to go.
Really would. 3-2 Slovenia is my pick, which would be one of the great wins of volleyball at all time in recent history. But we'll see. I'm
going to disagree with you, Rob. I think Slovenia is obviously a great team. I don't think they look quite as solid as they did in 2019. I think it's the age is starting to show a little bit with this team. Obviously, they still have a huge amount of veteran experience, which is extremely valuable. They're still jumping fine, but I don't know. I think there's a little rust around the edges, and I think that's going to be enough for Poland to win the first set. And like you said, that first set is going to be absolutely so important. I think Poland's going to snowball a bit, and I think Poland takes it 3-0 today.
3-0. Okay, wow. Yeah, it's very difficult for me to pick against Poland. They might be more talented, or honestly, they might be more talented at every position. But Slovenia as a team and the history in this tournament and just the mental aspect of this is something I really like for the Slovenian side. A matchup in particular I want to watch is we've talked about this before on the show, that Klemen Cebul for Slovenia has kind of been strategized into the leading scorer role, something that's more often in high level volleyball these days given to the opposite. Just like give him all the balls and let him hit 40 balls a match, and if he hits 400 or 450 or whatever, then you're in good shape. It's a little bit different for Slovenia, especially in VNL this year. But I want to see the matchup of Klemen Cebul versus Fabian Drizga, the blocker.
Yeah, that's a good one.
If Slovenia can play the rotational matchups in such a way that Cebul can be hitting against Drizga, that's massive for Slovenia. Just Drizga's not that big of a setter. I mean, he's what, like 195-ish. That's a good
not a huge
setter.
Jumper either. Not a huge jumper.
Not a huge jumper. He's not like an unbelievable athlete like Dejan Vincic, example. Slovenia's setter is a phenomenally good blocking setter. That's just not a strength of Drizga's game. And even if it's earned out hitting more in the more rotations against Drizga, Slovenia would be crazy not to exploit that. Yeah, I think Slovenia would be crazy not to exploit that particular matchup. And with that outside hitter spot is a place where they want to go a lot anyway. I'm interested to see how they move around that particular blocking matchup, because if I were them, I'd be afraid of Bartosz Kurek blocking because he's big and physical and terrifying, and Drizga's just not the same kind of blocker. So that's going to be really interesting for me.
All right, Rob, expert analysis. We do have to wrap up the second one in about 5 or 6 minutes here, though, because we do need to get started on the matches, guys. They're happening soon. We're setting up the court. The gates are opening soon, so things are starting to happen. But we still have time. We still have time, Rob. Don't worry. For our next preview, Italy versus Serbia. And before you go, Rob, I'm going to talk a little bit about Italy because I've been with them since the start of the tournament, watched every point of every match, and I have to say this Italy team is, like I said on the last show, ahead of schedule. I would say is the key word for it. Like,
exactly.
I think we were expecting this team to be this good like 2 or 3 years from now. But I don't know what it is about putting on the Italian uniform, but Daniele Lavia's taken a step up. Gianluca Galassi looks awesome. Micheletto, I mean, maybe we could expect it from him, but like, he's been unbelievable so far. And the whole team is, I mean, Gianelli's been working his magic. And Fabio Balassa, who I thought probably might have been a good pick for the Olympics anyway, is really locking down the reception line with the two maybe shakier receivers in Lavia and Micheletto. But and again, as I said on the last show, these guys are so ahead technically maybe of a lot of other countries in terms of their scenarios, in terms of their ball skills, that it's incredible to watch. And I think they're not the most athletic team, but they definitely have enough athleticism to hang around. And having Micheletto as a super athletic, like 7-foot attacking outside hitter is something else.
That's such a good point. I'm so glad you brought that up a couple shows ago about just the quality of contact and the ball skill and just the experience of all Italian players growing up in that system that they all have. It's been totally on display this tournament. You've had a front row seat to all of it, obviously. And that's a team as young as that is, that definitely ahead of schedule, like you mentioned. That is such an advantage of theirs. Just making such smart decisions with ball in different situations and controlling the ball and understanding different situations ahead of maybe their peers, perhaps. It's really impressive about this particular team. This matchup, though, against Serbia, the reigning champions, who somebody put it in the chat that I picked that upset the other day, Turkey over Serbia. I was close, but I was wrong. It was a very good match. Serbia, the reigning champions, have that experience in this sort of a tournament that Italy doesn't have. I think that's the biggest difference between these two teams. And I think the key player in this particular matchup will be Giulio Pinali for Italy, the opposite, like the new
for
opposite
sure,
this tournament. If he can hit even 30% efficiency, I think Italy stands a great chance. But if they're relying on all of their offense from Micheletto and Lavia, I think Serbia is just going to be way too strong. They've got to have balance across the entire net, front and back row, in order to have a chance against this particular Serbian team. I think that's the crucial matchup right there.
Yeah, but Rob, who's going to stop Micheletto? Like, maybe we're being, it's a bit hyperbole here, but like he is, like nobody has been able to slow him down this tournament. Yeah, I think definitely Julio Pinali is a good matchup. And my other question for me is if the Italian middles, fantastic Simone Anzani and Chico Gulassi, maybe like easily up there with offensively with the other middle blockers in this tournament. Blocking, not quite maybe at the level of Serbia with Pedrashin and Lisinac, and of course of Poland with Novakovsky and Kowanowski. So I think if they get, if teams are able to, or Serbia, I guess in this case, is able to play around a little bit with those middle blockers that have them second guessing themselves and slowing them down, Serbia is a team that's very much able to execute on one block situations. If Jovovic able to capitalize on it is maybe the question, but definitely that's a possibility.
Such a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I was just about to talk about the middles and just the position battle between the two teams. The Serbian middles are unbelievable. Marko Pedrashin and Srećko Lisinac and Petar Krsmanovic, if they need him. I think all three of those guys are better than any middle that Italy has in the country. Serbia just exports unbelievable middles somehow. They've got a factory of them. And that is a massive advantage, especially in blocking, exactly like you said, because like you said, Micheletto hasn't really been slowed down this tournament so far, and I agree, but he has not played against middle blockers of that caliber yet in this tournament. And I think that's really, really important. I think that the Serbian middles have the advantage over the Italians. Italy's got a clear advantage in both setter and libero.
Rob, I'm really sorry. Once again, I feel like I did this on the last show, but we got it. We got to wrap this up. Yeah, it's time to go. Thank you guys once again. Rob, I hate to cut you off like that because I know you're making a really good point, but unfortunately, logistically, we were unable
That's
to
okay.
conclude.
It's okay. My points don't need to be talked about because we've got volleyball to watch. Like 2 hours from now, the first one. Make sure you know where to watch it, and we'll be back next week to break down the final.